Welcome everyone to First Unitarian Church of Honolulu's weekly Tuesday night Pau Hana. It's the time where we gather and hear about some of the things going on in our community, whether that be the church community or our wider beloved community. And some days we take an opportunity to hear what is really going on with some of the people that we know. And it's a busy time of year with the legislature. And I know some of the things our whole congregation has their collective eyes on is a bill or some different versions of bills making their way through the legislature to raise the minimum wage, or really better, to approach perhaps a living wage. So I could think of no better guest to kick us off with some of this discussion today than Nate Hix, a longtime friend of Faith Action and of this congregation, to talk about what a living wage in Hawaii could be and how possible it might be this year or in the coming years. So everyone, welcome Nate Hix. Yay! A lot of us are wearing our, I think, beautifully designed Living Wage Hawaii shirts. And it's a pleasure. Yes, Matt's got it. If you don't have one, you should really get one. It's a great conversation starter. I don't think I've worn it without having someone say, hey, I like your shirt. And if you are wearing your shirt and you don't meet anyone who says, hey, I like your shirt, you should probably start going to new places, right, Nate? Yeah. So the format of our time together will be, if you have questions, some people, because they had detailed questions, sent them to me in advance and I got them to Nate. Thank you very much to the people who did that. But if you have questions, go ahead and put them just to me in the chat so we don't distract Nate as he's sharing and talking. If you can do your best to stay muted yourselves, we kind of keep it casual here, that'd be great. And there's no rules, those are just suggestions. So with that, Nate, my first question I usually ask people is, though you've probably answered this before, is who are you and what do you do?
I'm Nate Hix, originally from Minnesota. I've been in Hawaii over 8 years now. I used to be a high school teacher. Now I'm a full-time mortgage broker, and then also part-time advocate for particularly raising the minimum wage here. So years ago, my friends and I decided that there wasn't enough attention, enough effort, and enough great shirts going around showing that we needed to raise the minimum wage. So fortunately, my close friend was a communications director for a local nonprofit, and she designed the shirts. So kudos to her. Had another friend who was a finance treasurer for another nonprofit, and then I have my marketing background. So we thought between the three of us, we have the tools necessary to sort of bring some attention to this issue. And that's when Living Wage Hawaii started. And we've been attempting to raise the minimum wage ever since 2018, unsuccessfully, unfortunately, but a lot of positive energy going around right now. So hopefully 2022, we will be in a much better position.
So what's led to the what's in the air? First, what's led to it? And second, how much faith or confidence do you have in it?
So
he's not a teenager.
Just some background. 2019, there was a unique provision in the bill that year that ended up causing some people pause, and so they cut the bill at the last second. And then in 2020, there were plans again to raise the minimum wage, and then the pandemic hit, so they cut it. And then in 2021, the House particularly said the pandemic was still too damaging to the economy and to local businesses, that they didn't want to bring minimum wage up to the table. And so now, for a number of reasons, this being an election year, I think legislators are really want to show their constituents that they can do something. Also, it does seem that the pandemic is not as burdensome to our economy as was the case a year ago, 9 kind of months into the pandemic. So those are all things that I think helped lead us to a better position. And then about a month ago now, Speaker Psyche had come out to he's the Speaker of the House. He had come out to the Star Advertiser and other media outlets, I think, and pretty much said, hey, I want to raise the minimum wage to $18 an hour this year. And coming from the Speaker of the House, right, he's the Nancy Pelosi of Hawaii. It's a big statement, and especially since the House had been the sort of resistance up until that point, it really is a big shift from previous years when they were talking about 11, 12, 13 bucks an hour before. And so then fortunately, the Senate, who has been very supportive of our efforts for years now, they've passed out a $15 minimum wage bill a few times already. Literally, it's been the House that has refused their proposals. The Senate jumped on it right away. They drafted their own $18 minimum wage bill, and they already scheduled 2 hearings for it, passed out of both hearings, and it has passed the entire Senate and is now waiting to be heard from the House. So the Senate has already they've done the bill. It's passed. If the House wanted to, they could pass the Senate version in the next couple of weeks, and it could be on the governor's desk. So that kind of leads us to where we are now, and that's all the reason why I'm feeling much more hopeful for this year.
Great. If you could just maybe take us back a little. Yeah, that is fast, Matt. We'll see how it goes. Could you take us back and, I mean, what is a living wage in Hawaii? How do you define a living wage? I'm sure there are definitions in other places, but when someone says, okay, living wage, why? Well, what's a living wage? How far away are we? How do you define it? Can you just kind of lay the groundwork for folks who are new to this?
Yeah, sure. So there are many different organizations that sort of analyze what it just costs to keep the lights on, to pay your rent, to feed yourself, to transport yourself, healthcare. We have been using the definition that the local state Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism uses, because every 2 years they study the cost of living here locally, and they put out a report, and we felt it was the easiest and kind of best accepted study, since it's our own state government doing it. It's not like some super left-leaning nonprofit organization or some other non-Hawaii organization. It's a local state-run government, to a degree unbiased by whatever I say, right? I mean, this report's been going out for years. So that seemed like the best way to look at it. And they come out and they just came out with a new study, and they said a single adult in Honolulu needs $18.63 an hour working full-time just to be able to make ends meet, to meet their basic necessities. They also do it for a 2-adult family, I think a 1 adult with kids, or a 2 adult with kids. And so if it's a 4-person family, they need about, I think, $19.50, and that was for the year 2020. And so we've just been using that figure. And then obviously, as inflation happens, as it's been happening, I think it's been on a lot of people's minds lately, as we've been experiencing a lot of it. The costs are expected to rise as we go forward. And so, $18 was necessary 2 years ago. And so that had kind of been our target. And, we're at 10.10 now. So we have a lot of ways to go to get to where we need to go.
And I guess my question is, just as a person or as an advocate, is that a choice to just say, well, this is the number that we can't really argue with? But you personally, do you think that amount of money is really a living wage? I mean, is that based on working 50 hours a week, or what's that like? What kind of quality of life are we talking about with that amount?
Yeah, so that's assuming a 40-hour work week. I think it's 52 weeks a year. We're not talking a high quality life at all, right? It's a nose to the grindstone, no vacation, no eating out at a nice restaurant, and so there are other studies that try to put into a little more wiggle room. And they put the figures up around maybe $20 or $21 an hour, right? And so, from my perspective, those figures would be better to attain, right? And I guess from our perspective, it was kind of like the idea that we're not even close to even the nose at the grindstone level is just appalling, embarrassing, exploitative. And so it's sort of completely unacceptable that even at that level, workers are, making almost half of what's necessary. And so, but yeah, we're not even close to that already low level.
Yeah. What is the minimum wage in Hawaii right now, for those who don't know?
Yeah, $10.10 an hour, and it's been that way for 4 years. And before that, in 2014, it was only $7.25.
Does living wage take a stance on the tip exception, in restaurant workers? Like, where are you on that?
Yeah, so a little background. In many states and nationally, the minimum wage for all workers usually does not apply to workers who receive tips. So that pretty much is talking about restaurant servers, waiters, waitresses. What in most laws say, they go, well, the minimum wage here is, let's just say nationally it's $7.25, but servers can be paid as little as, I think, $2.13 an hour. And they just kind of say, hey, you work for tips, so the restaurant doesn't have to pay you pretty much at all. Hawaii's minimum wage is $10.10 for most workers, but for servers, restaurants can pay as little as $9.25. And so there's or $9.35, I think. There's a 75-cent decline between what the minimum wage is and what servers can be paid. Our stance is nobody should be dependent upon tips from people in the restaurant, whether it's patrons or whoever. Tipping has a pretty terrible history. It's rooted in a lot of sexism, racism, and the outcomes sort of bear that out. There's a lot of harassment that goes on. And so rather than making people work for tips, rather than having just their general wages cover their cost of living, we're against allowing restaurants to pay less than the standard minimum wage.
Okay. Yeah, I think some people kind of know that in the back of their mind, but hearing the numbers and the way it works. I grew up working at restaurants in New York, and I think it was like $2 or $2.35. And I was a bartender at a nice restaurant, so I did fine, but that was not the case for everyone. But it puts you in like a precarious spot. So we had a question. What is the strategy that I assume one of your biggest opponents has been the quote Chamber of Commerce. And what has been, did you have a strategy to kind of deal with what they were putting out or what they were saying, or this time around, did it just kind of work, or like how did things go with them this time?
So it's a bit of an interesting situation this year. So at the start of 2020, the Chamber of Commerce, so in 2019, the Chamber of Commerce opposed the increase. And then in 2020, I think they had sort of, worked out an agreement with the House leadership that the $13 minimum wage over 4 years that they were proposing, the chamber was not going to, the local Hawaii Chamber of Commerce was not going to oppose, which comes off of what at the time the National Chamber of Commerce had pretty much come out already, like their president, the national president of the Chamber of Commerce had said, we're no longer opposed to raising the minimum wage. I think they kind of saw the writing on the wall, and they also recognized the massive benefit that raising the minimum wage has, right? The chamber is a consumer-based industry, right? And having people with more money increases commerce. And so nationally, that was kind of their stance. And so I think the local Chamber of Commerce, between that and the low minimum wage proposal that the House was suggesting at 13, they're kind of like, all right, we'll kind of let you have it. And so then the pandemic hit and the bill got squashed anyway. And then 2021 came, and the chamber had a built-in excuse of the pandemic. And so they were like, oh, businesses are falling apart. We can't fight COVID, so how can we pay people? And so that was their stance last year. Now this year is very interesting because for those who are unaware, Sherry Minor McNamara, she's the president and CEO of the local Chamber of Commerce. She's running for lieutenant governor this year. And so I think that also plays a huge part where she's trying to win over, hundreds of thousands of Democratic voters. And so I think it would be very difficult for her to come against probably one of the largest legislation that it looks like it's going to pass anyway, and then try to win votes later. So I think they're tiptoeing this line of not outright opposing it, but the other neighbor Chamber of Commerce's did come out against it. So I think Maui Chamber and Big Island Chamber have come out against it. So, but fortunately, from our standpoint, we recognize who they are. They're financed by large corporations for the most part. They do a pretty decent job of claiming that they're the voice of small business. But at the end of the day, their job really is to oppose the minimum wage when it doesn't fit exactly in their model. And our job is from our perspective, we've been trying to focus on the positive, rally around the people and rally around the ideas and data that overwhelmingly shows that this is a good idea. And we're going to allow the people who spread, the people who use talking points that aren't based in fact, we kind of just let them do their thing and provide the positive data that shows that we're kind of on the right side. And again, having the National Chamber of Commerce kind of come out a few years ago saying, yeah, we're fine with raising the minimum wage, really puts a lot of damage into anything that they say.
Yeah. Thank you. David, I saw you had your hand up. And if you've got a question, you could just put it in the chat and I'll get it asked. What would Sam Slom, I have a question from the Small Business Hawaii, have to say about raising the minimum wage? Do you know Sam or ever dealt with him?
Remind me who he is.
Small Business Hawaii. I'm getting a question from someone. I think the question is like, what would small businesses or a small business based Hawaii group say about raising the minimum wage?
Oh, okay. So it really depends who you're asking, right? So for example, TJ, you help lead a church. Does that mean you speak for all churches? I would highly doubt it, right? Sam is somebody who speaks on behalf of some businesses, and many might align with him, but many others align differently, right? We have the shirts that you're wearing right now are printed by a small business in Hawaii, and they're huge supporters, right? Everybody's different, and it really depends who you ask. At the end of the day, the data overwhelmingly supports raising the minimum wage is good for our local economy, it's good for workers, and it's good for businesses. The number of small businesses in Hawaii increased during the last minimum wage increase. It's a large misnomer that raising the minimum wage is bad for business. It's it's a story that gets told over and over again without any data to back it up. Again, it's a consumer-based economy. And so if workers are struggling and don't have money in their pockets, they can't spend it. Businesses can easily pass on the additional cost to work that they have for their employees onto consumers. And it's a very small amount, right? Low wage labor is a very small portion of costs for small businesses, right? They have other costs, rent, electricity, goods, insurance costs, things like this. And so a common misconception we hear is they're like, oh, if the minimum wage is $10 now and it's going to move to $18, well, then a price of something that's $10 now will be $18. And that's just far from the case. Raising the minimum wage from $10 to $18 will result in approximately a 6% increase in costs, right? So a $10 item would be $10.60, which is a very palatable increase over several years to incur, especially when it goes to helping make sure that the person serving you that cheeseburger or whatever it is can afford to feed themselves, right? Like the idea that we want to go to and shop at businesses while exploiting the workers helping provide us that service is just wrong. And there aren't people out there who want that to happen. Nobody goes to sleep at night thinking, man, I really wish I could attend or go shop at a business that had really poor workers. That is just my dream, you know? And so again, the data supports it. It really is good for small businesses. It's good for the economy. And in addition, when you do raise the minimum wage here in Hawaii, the average wages also get a bump up too, that can even more than compensate for the small increase in cost. So workers across all spectrums are going to be doing better, and that's going to be good for small businesses. So I don't know exactly what Sam would say, but if he was a student of economics and looked at the data, I would hope that he would come to the same conclusion.
Yeah. I know I don't know if you had a chance to kind of take a look at one of the questions we got before, but one of them was, and this might help people get a comparison, is that the MIT sort of economic calculator says that the poverty wage in Honolulu is $7.06 an hour. Do you work much with kind of the more wonky numbers of comparing these, or are you just kind of like, I just don't really know what that means, and 1010 sounds awfully close to 706, which is why I'm kind of asking. So can you say something about that?
Yeah, I am the wonky guy.
Okay.
I'm hoping my marketability shines through more than my nerdy statistics side. But yeah, so there's a federal poverty level that exists in every state, and they pretty much set it. Well, actually, there's a federal poverty level, and it's level at which people are eligible for assistance at the federal level. So, for example, I think we're all very familiar with the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. How much you receive in subsidies at the national level from the federal government is dependent upon your income compared to this like federal poverty level number. Again, it's a bureaucratic number. It's not really based in any like hard study of costs at all. It's just kind of what has come about.
There's an agreed equation by someone in the Health and Human Services or something that actually was created, for those who care, like 80 years ago by a woman in the thing. Anyway, and they use this calculation to determine it. But yeah.
Yeah, and so just because it's the federal poverty level puts it at $7 now, that's not getting you anywhere close to what you need to be, right? In my perspective, you're impoverished if you're making $15 an hour, right? If you're looking at the dictionary definition of what poverty is, although there's a federal formal capital P poverty level that they use to determine, that's not really applicable in my opinion, but it does help get you subsidies depending on what your situation is. So again, for the Affordable Care Act, if your income is within 4 times the poverty level for your specific family type, then you're eligible for a certain number of subsidies, right? If you're below that $7 an hour rate, I think you get full subsidies, right? You're getting all of the insurance paid for, where if you're closer to the 4 times that amount, you're eligible for smaller subsidies. And that's just one of the number of services that kind of use this federal poverty level number to determine what services are available, whether it's housing or food or other tax credits or things like that.
And so it sounds like the system is so linked to the determination of a minimum wage for a state is really tied somewhat to this federal number, because that's like sort of this basis. So one of the questions that we got in advance was sort of, would we go ever to a more European model of using a median income in order to determine a municipality or a state or a country's support level, level at which they would receive some kind of support or bring some, I don't know if they really use the word minimum wage, but to make those determinations of benefits, or maybe it is called a minimum wage. So yeah, is there any chance, could a state do that absent like the federal, or could the federal, do you think the US could ever go to something more humane like that? Or do you think the model we have with like the federal minimum poverty level and then states determining a quote like sort of a zero sum game, this is the absolute bottom, this number is just what we're always going to have? Or do you have hopes for a more holistic approach in the future? Is this the first step of Nate's grand plan to something better? So
the simple answer from my perspective is that the federal poverty level for most purposes is kind of just not applicable in a lot of situations, right? If you're just not working at all, those are kind of the people that are eligible for these kinds of things. And even then, even the people who are eligible, a lot of them aren't getting access. So we all know that housing is a large, massive portion of costs, not just here in Hawaii, but nationwide, right? Whether it's rent or mortgage. And so a lot of people are kind of are aware of Section 8 housing or government subsidized housing. And that is a huge portion of cost that could be a tremendous benefit. The unfortunate reality here in the US is the federal government doesn't fund it anywhere near the need. Something to the degree of, and maybe some of you have seen these videos, is like, there's a pot of money that goes to each like local housing district, okay? And the government says, hey, this is your population, so we're just giving you X amount of money, and then you can figure out who it goes to. And there are so many people that need it. In some districts, less than 1% of those eligible actually get a housing voucher, right? So although there are these federal poverty lines that allow you to technically qualify for help, you're not really getting anything anyway. It might help you with health insurance, it might help you with some food, but you're still scraping by to try to meet your housing requirements. And so from my perspective, these like federal poverty level numbers aren't kind of the problem. The problem is the vast amount of poverty that exists in the first place. Making sure working people can afford their basic needs without help from the government, I think, is primary goal number one. And then for those that are unable to work or for whatever reason, they just need to get cash, like, you know, a basic income. And fortunately, these ideas have become much more prominent during the pandemic. We've kind of learned that you can just start sending out checks to people, the unemployed, and the economy is not going to collapse. People are still going to have money. And so that's kind of my personal strategy that things should go. If you're trying to create some sort of like hoops for people to jump through based on some bureaucratic number, it's just ripe for kind of corruption and abuse. And if you get the wrong legislature in there or the wrong president in there, they can bump that number down and cut funding pretty easily. So making sure people who do show up to work have enough money is primary goal number one from my perspective.
So, I mean, looking at this happening, I mean, we've been around for bills that look like they're going to go through or that we fought for really hard and things like that. And at the last second, you have a governor veto it, or what? I just want to be sure we're not getting lulled. Not that I'm paranoid, but that we're not getting lulled into any sense of security that isn't earned. And so what are the plans to push this, make sure it's getting over that? What's needed? What are you thinking? What's in the works here?
Yeah, no, that's a good way to phrase things. And I'm right now cautiously optimistic, right? I'm in the same boat you are. I've seen shenanigans get played, not just for the minimum wage bill, but other bills as well. And so, yeah, although things do look good, I tried to frame it in such a way that says they look better than previous years. We're not in a position where we can, shut down shop and wait until the bill's signed. It's still full speed ahead for sure on our efforts, trying to make sure we're pulling the right strings. So just to sort of get a more detailed idea of what's going on currently is, so the Senate bill raises the minimum wage to $18 an hour by 2026. Okay. From our perspective, that is a great time frame and a great dollar amount. Okay. An $8 increase over 4 years would put us in a fantastic position. The House, however, is proposing a bill that's $18 an hour by 2030. So that's $8 over 8 years. Okay. So from our perspective, we would really like it if the House adopted the Senate version. Okay. How we can do that, we are hopeful that we can get as many people to call their local representative and ask them to, move on the Senate bill. That's our stance right now. We have meetings with leadership here coming up soon. Hopefully we can get a good answer. But we don't have a February, March, April, May game plan fully fleshed out, because we're still, I think this is week 3 of the session. And, fortunately the Senate had moved so quickly and they've got the bill ready and waiting. And so we're putting all of our efforts towards just bringing attention towards the Senate bill. $18 by 2026, pass it, it's great, that's what we want. If we are unable to get that, then we're going to have to figure out the next step. But for right now, that's where we're at. Talk to your representatives, ask them, $18 by 2026, will you support the Senate bill, which is, in my opinion, has a great name. It's SB 2018 for $18 an hour. So.
Very nice. Yeah. You don't get to choose those, right? It just kind of gets assigned.
I think if you get your ducks in a row, you can kind of get a good number. So I'm pretty confident Senator Donaguchi did that, but it could have been happenstance as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Someone, Matt, is asking in the chat. There's, I think you just sort of answered this, right? There's a lot on the ledge on the state side about a minimum wage, or I'm sorry, on the House side about a minimum wage. But rather than getting into the merits of those right now, the strategy is keep everyone focused on the one that the Senate has already passed and try to move legislators toward that bill, right?
Yes, exactly. There are always tons of bills, and usually the way that things go are the Senate is going to pick one bill and they're going to pass that. The House is going to pick one bill and they're going to pass that. So there is a House bill out there. I don't even know the number, which I guess is a sign of how little I'm trying to get that thing through. But it does exist. I could probably find it if necessary, but no, the Senate bill is the bill we want. And all the other bills that exist and are out there, I doubt will ever get any attention. So we do have a strong bill. Fortunately, the Senate passed it. We are a third of the way there. And the other good thing is the governor has actually come out and said that he supports the Senate version as well. So based on his word, we're 2/3 of the way there. So SB 2018, that is the bill we want.
Great. And so you're good with the graduated increase over the next 4 years, like that's what you wanted, like, I mean, and it seems like the way to go. Okay, cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the unfortunate reality is we're just in a massive hole and it's not reasonable to get there tomorrow. That's just how economics works in general. The graduated increase is the path we would like. And so, this is it's a great bill.
Great. Yeah. It's someone asked, earlier also, like, not to dwell on the past too much, but what happened to Hawaii, like in so many other ways? And it's one of the things I keep discovering when I come here is you hear about how liberal it is and it has really good health coverage. I mean, one of the best in the nation, like really cares for a lot of people in lots of ways. What happened with this one? Is it the nature of how did it get so far behind? And it's not, if you look at the South, it's not far behind, but if you look at most other states that you think of kind of in the same way as Hawaii, it seems it's lagging. Is there a history there? Is it the nature of the place? And I don't know, I could start to guess, but I'd rather ask you. So
I don't have all of the answers. I just don't. I do know that, Hawaii is still somewhat more progressive on some issues, right? Usually on a lot of the social issues, Hawaii is doing a pretty good job. I'm not sure how the minimum wage issue kind of got left behind. I do know at least that, so California was the first state to pass a $15 minimum wage. And the way they went about it is they have a very large union, the Service Industry Employees Union. And so these workers are working near the minimum wage. These are McDonald's workers, these are Taco Bell workers, these are, minimum wage workers. And they have a very large organized union. And they were the ones who started the Fight for 15 movement, right? We've all heard that number. We've all heard that name. They started it, I think it was 9 years ago now, right? And they were pushing and pushing and pushing. And so the California legislature, which is also looked at as very left-leaning and progressive to a degree, refused to pass it, okay? And so what they decided to do is they were going to put a $15 minimum wage on the ballot. You're in California,
right.
You have a massive amount of Democratic voters who are in support of this, as are a majority of Republican voters support a $15 minimum wage. So it's absolutely going to pass in California. And then the California legislature kind of realized, oh, this is going to happen with or without us. So why don't we try to take the political win and pass it out? And so it was not until the unions had pushed and pushed and pushed to get this thing passed that the California progressive legislature reluctantly did it, right? And then as you see throughout the nation, the other states that followed afterwards to pass a $15 minimum wage, they also had very strong SEIU union support. Unfortunately, in Hawaii, we don't have that union. We do not have a union full of low wage, minimum wage workers. The closest thing we have is kind of Local 5. They're the hotel workers in mostly Waikiki. But their starting pay, I think, is $26 an hour. So it's not aligned directly with them to focus solely on organizing around the minimum wage as much as it is for the minimum wage workers in other states. And so for this particular last 10 years of fight, I can point to that as probably being one of the reasons, because Democrats across the nation were also reluctant to sort of raise the minimum wage without that big push. So yeah, that's kind of the best answer I can give.
No, that's really helpful, because it makes me wonder, without that union and without the people, all such the large groups that are, it does kind of raise this question of unionization and who are the people, what industries are making minimum wage the most. I mean, I know you mentioned fast food and others, but who, just can you give us a sense of who are, say, the top 3 industries where people are making minimum wage? I'm just wondering with that. I mean,
yeah, so it's going to be this. It's going to be the same group. It's going to be the fast food workers, right?
Okay.
McDonald's, Burger King, Zippy's, whoever. And then it's also going to be the retail stores, right? If you go to any mall or any store in the malls, they're going to be making minimum wage. Janitors are going to be making near minimum wage. Line cooks are going to be making near minimum wage. Yeah, I mean, and then as you start coming up the ladder, right? $13, $14, $15 an hour. There's still tons of people across the board. Something like 200,000, over 200,000 workers are making under $18 an hour now. And I can, if you give me 2 seconds, I can actually pull up a pretty good list for you.
Great.
Yeah.
We're learning a lot today, right? I think we're getting deeper than we did the last time, because last time it was more just how are we going to do this? Now it's kind of happening. We're learning a lot more about it. So I remember the hearings on this 3 years ago, and hearing from people that own, it was people that own shops and malls, and kind of a range. And then the best dressed people in the room, the people from the Chamber of Commerce. It was almost inappropriate. We're all there in aloha shirts, and everything. And this woman walks in like a $1,500 red dress. And I was like, what is going on? Anyway, she was something else.
Yeah, that's the game that is played for sure. So yeah, I'll say I have a much different view on how the legislative system works.
Yeah, we're gonna get to campaign finance in a second.
Oh, good. I was thinking about that earlier today. So I'll drop this link in here if people want to follow along. If you're really interested in trying to figure out which workers are making low wages.
I can give you screen share if you want to show people. Is it that kind of thing?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. That'll work.
All right, you should be able to share now if you want.
Okay. So yeah, so you can look here, and this is a pretty detailed list of a lot of jobs, and you can see the number of workers that make less than this amount. So percent that makes less than 12, percent that makes less than 15, percent that makes less than 17, percent that makes less than 20. And so for my purposes, less than 17 is kind of the number you're looking at. Personal care people. Yeah, that's a big one too.
Yeah.
Aides and things, which is terribly embarrassing that they're paid so little. So healthcare support occupations, food prep, grounds cleaning maintenance, sales related occupations. There's almost no industry that you're not going to find tons of people, right? Home health aides, 90% of them under 17. Cooks, fast food, 90%. Food prep workers.
100%. Who's this? Oh, home health aides. Yeah, 100% make under 20. Interesting.
Yeah. Dishwashers for sure. Dining room attendants. So I mean, it's economy wide, really. Amusement recreation attendants.
Ooh, retail sales. Yeah.
Yep.
Retail sales, 24,000 people. Yeah.
Office clerk, 60%.
While we're going through this, someone did have a question. The difference between, is there a difference between rural and urban? Like, are people in Honolulu just going to make more? How many of these numbers are coming out of, Kona or other places around the state? Do you get much into that, or is this mostly a Oahu fight?
That I do not know how it breaks down by island, unfortunately. Okay. But from our perspective, sorry, was there any more that we need, or do we deal it okay?
Yeah, I mean, people are kind of, also taxi drivers, I didn't realize, but I guess they're also tipped too. I don't know how that works, but
yeah. But
interesting.
But yeah, cost of living, other than on Big Island and specifically Hilo, cost of living on Maui and Kauai is just as high. So,
right.
You're still talking huge portions, not getting paid enough.
Yeah.
And if you scroll down it,
I think that's it. So you can break it down by demographic as well.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the stats that I like to show is it's not just a teenage or a low 20-year-old age issue, right? 40% of 25 to 39-year-olds are making 17 or less, and 40 to 50-year-olds are still talking about a huge portion of the population.
Yeah, we could do the math, but I guess this is kind of showing also, because there was a question is, what does the minimum wage look like when you figure it as an annual income?
That's about $21,000.
Okay, so currently 1010 comes out to 21,000.
Correct.
A year. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's what's coming up. Not to completely change. They're linked. They have to be, because when you were talking about the legislatures in California, who know that so many people in the state, and there are many issues like this, like voting rights and other things that, and you are an advocate in a field where almost all the people who are citizens want it and are prepared to pay for it, their taxes to go up a little bit or their costs to go up or however it's going to get passed on. Yet it doesn't happen in the legislature. I'm not a political scientist, but someone's getting paid to prevent it from being enacted. And do you think about that? And what do you think about that? And it, where do you lose hope, or do you think my next battle is going to be on campaign finance or on something like that? What's your take? I see you smiling. Bless you, Nate, which is great, but go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, not just here in Hawaii, but I mean, nationwide and globally, right? Democracy is fairly new. It's, only a few hundred years old. And its level of effectiveness has, in my opinion, shown to be pretty low. It's way better than autocracy or dictatorship or whatever the case might be, which was kind of the law of the land or monarchy up until, the 18th century. So, I think I was raised, maybe not intentionally or unintentionally, but I was raised to kind of believe that justice will be served. We live in, one of the wealthiest countries, and, we live in somewhat of a fair society. And if people want something, it will happen. And, as I grew up, I kind of come to the realization that there is, corruption does exist. It's not all roses and rainbows. And now you see all these studies coming out showing that, the wishes of the general population is largely ignored, kind of regardless of the issue. And so you can look across the board. I think one of the ones I like to point to is no matter the district, across the board, the representative, and we're talking for the U.S. Congress, right? The Ed Cases, the Kai Kaheles, formerly Tulsi Gabbards, right? And not just them, but all 435 of them nationwide. When you pull the people in their district, and then you look at the voting record of their representative, Democrats and Republicans alike all vote far to the right of their constituents. And at first I was kind of surprised and I was kind of shocked. But then when you kind of think about how our democracy works, and it's largely financed by a very small portion of society, a very wealthy portion of society, it's kind of no surprise that you're going to see them lean more towards the people that pay them, right? And so that's just the unfortunate reality of how our system works. And at first I was, very upset and well, that's not right. That's not fair. They should act better. But we're talking about 435 people in a system that has been the way it is for so long. It's kind of almost like being mad at gravity, man, I wish it didn't, I wish I could jump higher. Well, sorry. And so my next response is, what is the way to go about it that can sort of make change? I don't have the answer. Obviously, I've been doing this for 4 years and have 0 wins. So if you're looking for guidance on ways to get around it, I'm the last person you should ask. But from my perspective, I do think that being aware of this and making sure that you're not just sort of expecting people to represent the ideals that the community wants, it is just not going to happen. And so the reason I was thinking about this earlier is because I read an article today talking about who is leading the campaign fundraising numbers for the governor and lieutenant governor seats. And it was an article that was just kind of hey, here are the figures. This person's leading, this person's coming in second. Here's how much they raised. Here's how much money they have in store. And it's not really presented. It's presented in a sort of matter of fact way, because obviously it's incredibly important. Almost every time someone has the most money, they're going to win. That's just kind of the reality of the situation. And it was kind of just a moment where I go, man, it's really too bad that this article can kind of just exist. And this isn't a knock to the reporter in any way, right? This is just the fact of the world. But my point was kind of it's kind of too bad that these articles just kind of come out and be so matter of fact without being highly critical of how terrible the system is that exists in this manner. like, I think every article that kind of reflects on campaign reports or campaign fundraising reports should have to lead and end with, our democracy is broken as a result of the way that things work. And here are the people that are actively going to break it for you. These are the people, blah, 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 blah. And then end with, okay, so as a result, in conclusion, your democracy is not working as it should because of these rules, yet here are the winners that are working in a broken system. So
you could create a bot and run articles about it through the bot and publish it, and people would probably start to laugh a lot. But you say things like this shouldn't go unaddressed. I encourage everybody to come to worship on this point on Sunday at 10 a.m. to hear about this very point and democracy. I don't want to give anything away, but it just so happens Jerome Farrar is making an appearance, a surprise appearance, and will be preaching on Sunday about democracy and what it is and what it isn't. So anyway, tune in. You won't want to miss it.
So I do have a slight bit of hopeful part regarding campaign finance issues.
Oh, good.
And so a lot of people look towards Citizen United as the problem. Oh, you're letting in all this dark money. But our campaigns have been bought and paid for well before 2010, right? It's not like that made it an option. One thing that I think is amazing is Maine, the state of Maine, has a robust publicly financed campaign system. And all that it requires is candidates can go around, and I think they have to solicit a $5 donation to be in like an eligible amount, right? So they need to collect $5 from a person. And if they get, I think it's, 20 donations, then the state will kick in like $1,000 towards their campaign. And so if they get 100 $5 donations, so a total of $500, the state is going to kick in like $5,000 or something to that degree. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's a very robust system. And the way to be eligible for that system is the candidates have to actually say that they will take $0 in private money. So other than that $5 they took from the individual, right? And so you'll see that if you look at the data, over 80% of all Democratic legislators sign up for the system, take $0 in private donations, and are able to run based on state-funded campaign money. And so from my perspective, that greatly reduces the level of corruption because they're not trying to chase these very wealthy donors that would then influence their ability to govern. And unfortunately, a big question that always comes up is like, well, it's going to be so expensive and I don't want my money going to that, blah, 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 blah. But for the cost, so my example for here in Hawaii is if we levied a $1 tax per tourist, it would more than cover the entire cost of the campaign finance system. So it is very cheap at the overall cost of things. It would be less than $10 million, and that would take care of all of our elections. So I think other than maybe governor, because that's extremely expensive, but it's still very cheap and very reasonable and very effective. So Susan Collins, one of those public funding.
I think no, so Democratic. Yeah.
Well, and it's also for the local state legislature. So it's like the House candidate or the state House, state Senate, and state governor's race. It's not for federal elections. Okay. But yeah, thank you for your question.
So this has been awesome, Nate. Not just your insight, but your calmness is very assuring to me about the state of our democracy and your hope. I
was crying before and I'll be crying after, so you got me at the right moment. No,
good. We're in the right spot then, the sweet spot. What do you want? Is there anything we can do? I mean, you've already talked about calling our legislators. Is that really the main thing, or is there other stuff we should be looking at, watching, or tracking? We're getting pretty sophisticated. I think 4 or 5 of the people on this call gave oral testimony today on ending bringing a lot of change and revision to the cash bail system. So you got people who are watching stuff and get some testimony in and give some oral testimony. Is there something people should sign up for? Like I get the Raise Up Hawaii emails. Can you maybe put those in the chat, and I'll put them when I post this video tomorrow. I'll put the links with it also, so that people can get the information of what's happening when.
Yes, great. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to send to is, yeah, just getting on the mailing list is going to be the easiest thing, right? I can give you an action to do today, but as things change, there's going to be more stuff that we would like for you to be involved in.
I can just say to everyone that like I'm on the Living Wage Hawaii mailing list, and it's never inundative. It's personally crafted. Sometimes Nate just texts people to personally make sure that they're going to do stuff or whatever. It's really one of the most effective and non kind of it's used just for the function that it's intended for. I just want to give a personal vouch for the list. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of those people that hits unsubscribe probably 3 times a day off my email list. So I hate extra email. So I personally try to only send them out when it's absolutely necessary. But yeah, and then there's obviously unsubscribe buttons at the bottom if they're too much. So yeah, I would say subscribe to that, or if you're on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, you can follow us there as well. But one thing that I think, like outside of just following up and clicking the links and doing the things, I mean, I'm assuming you guys are already doing this already, but literally a call to the legislator and asking them, you know, what specifically are you doing to make sure that the Senate bill will be passed is something that they're just not hearing. They are unaware that their constituents need and want this to occur. As much as they might receive some emails that might be, you know, sent to all reps, they're unaware that it's their own person who hopefully is organized people in their own district as well, right? So if you can get one other person to also do the same in your district, that would be huge, because again, elections are in August. And so we will know the result of this bill in April. And so if your representative is either A, not supportive of the Senate bill, or B, unwilling to give you a sufficient answer as to why they're not acting to get that bill to pass, in order for democracy to work, you got to go out and you got to get somebody else in that seat, right? As much as I'm knocking the effectiveness of our democracy, there are technically still elections, and technically, if the other person gets more votes, they're going to be the winner. So the option still exists, although it's a huge uphill battle and winning is hard. It's definitely possible. And fortunately, we do have some amazing representatives in there as a result of, you know, the fight and the campaigning and things like that. So
remember, we had a guest. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so other than signing up for the mailing list, literally call them, have a conversation with their secretary, which is 99% of the case. You don't have to talk to them specifically, but make sure it's a very clear message. What are you doing to get the Senate bill passed? I'm hoping that you do. And if not, I'm happy to vote for whoever will. They never get those calls.
If I may, just on a technique thing, sometimes people don't know what to quote say. When you're calling your representative, ask questions. Just come up with questions. Are you voting for this? Oh, you're not. Why aren't you voting? You know, and so sometimes people they get stopped because they think they have to make a speech or they have to come up with like these facts or convince someone. It's their job to convince you to vote for them. Ask questions. You're entitled to answers. Just a hint for folks who are wondering how to get started with that. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and sort of actually to get more down to how Living Wage Hawaii started is, you know, I was advocating for raising the minimum wage, and then it was 2018 and I knew the elections were coming up, and I knew how important it was to make sure that I was voting for the right person. And although I was doing all this advocating, calling, you know, organizing, I didn't know who in my district was the right person to vote for on the minimum wage issue. And so I was like, if someone who's actively out there and doing stuff, doesn't know, how in the world is the average voter going to have any idea? And so that's actually one of the first things we did is we put out a voter guide. We called and asked every representative their stance, and then we published it to the best of our abilities. But yeah, you can be your own voting guide, at least for the interim. What is your stance on this? What is your stance on that? So yeah, it can be very, very helpful. And a lot of the secretaries are super nice. So don't feel that you need to pick a fight with them. You can be very polite. You don't need to be rude. It can be just a general, hey, you know, what are you thinking about this? I hope you do it this way. And I have a lot of people that are also thinking the same way.
Yeah, and in your research, if you find people that are not going to support it, just let me or Nate know, because we'll want to know. And so we can have some more people call them. But anyway, we've taken so much of your time, Nate. You've been so gracious, and it's just so wonderful to have you with us. And thank you for all that you're doing for so many. And it gives me a lot of hope. And I'm really happy that you've been here with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and love all the support as well. So don't hesitate to reach out, and hopefully see you all soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nate. Aloha.